Hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the first Indexing Transformation seminar. So this is part of our Mellon Foundation grant, and we're very pleased to start off with a talk on the Anthropocene, Capitalocene, and Toni Negri's thought. And we're very pleased to have Professors Luca Jourdan and Valerio Romitelli both from Bologna. And Luca is a professor of social and political anthropology at the University of Bologna, and he's worked on youth and war, childhood crisis, informal economies, and the frontier in North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And is currently doing work on Eritrean refugees in Kampala and the conflict between the central government and traditional kingdoms in Uganda. Valerio Romitelli is a professor of history and political theory and social sciences methodology at the University of Bologna, as well as having a position in Paris. He's done considerable amount of research, produced a number of books and articles on the history of the international labor movement, as well as the history on Italian partisans. And he's also conducted ethnographic research and work in factories and social cooperatives in Italy and France. Currently he's working on unemployment and giving seminars on the history of political thought at the University of Bologna. We've had a very productive discussion with the honours class with a whole range of issues emerge, which some of them perhaps will continue the conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. First of all, I do apologize for my English, but I think we are going to understand each other. We will talk about hegemony. So English has become hegemonic in the sense there is no people, not a real people who speaks English like it was maybe for Latin in the Renaissance, that it was just for intellectuals. Anyway, the title of our talk is Anthropocene, Capitalocene, and Antonio Negri, or Toni Negri's thought. I want to start from a short biography of Antonio Negri, or Toni Negri, which is one of the most famous intellectual worldwide known, at least Italian intellectual, or let's say even French intellectual, because he has been in exile in France for, let's say, 15 years, because he was accused of terrorism in Italy. So, Antonio Negri was born in 1933, and is among the intellectuals that founded the paradigm of workerism. We call it in Italian operaismo, but in English, the English translation is workerism. In the 60s was the youngest professor in the Italian Academy. He became professor very young, really very young, at the University of Padua. Through the idea of workerism, or the paradigm of workerism, Negri and other intellectuals gather around a journal called Quaderni Rossi, which means red books. This journal was called Red Books. And the goal was to contest the left parties, overall the Italian Communist Party. I don't know if you know, but the Italian Communist Party was the biggest communist party in Western Europe. It had like 30%, etc. Anyway, it was the biggest in not in Western Europe, but in the Western countries. So they wanted to, through this organization, they wanted to contest the Communist Party, accusing the party to have abandoned the factories and the workers who actually were at the core of the antagonism between work and capital. This third part of, let's say, Negri intellectual experience concluded with the foundation of a work organization called Potere Operaio. It was Workers' Powers. This is during the 60s, actually, Workers' Powers.
And this is Negri.
And this is Toni Negri when he was young, the one, the guy there. And this organization, Potere Operaio, was one of the most important organizations involved in the 68 in Italy, the 68. So the second part of his biography, in the middle of the 70s, is characterized by a further theorization on the overcoming of the Fordism. There is a shift for the Fordist model of production to a new model, and the merging of a new type of worker, the so-called, we call him the social worker. So this period in Western countries, at least in Italy, is characterized by the end of the industrial production based on big factories, like it was in Italy. The model was Fiat car factories, which was a really big factory in Torino, the industrial city, with about 50,000, 60,000 workers just in the same factory, just in a Fordist model of production. So this is the end of the Fordisms. And these big factories were replaced by a cluster of satellite factories diffused in the territory, more diffused in the factory. So it was a sort of internal relocation of the production. So to respond to this transformation of working condition, Negri and other militant intellectuals founded a movement called Autonomia Operaia. It was a new movement, which means autonomous workers movement, let's say. Maybe it could be the right translation. But this period, the 70s, was also an obscure period in Negri's life because he was accused of terrorism and to be one of the secret leader of the Red Brigades, Brigate Rosse. And the Red Brigades was was the major terrorist group active in Italy at that time. At that time in Italy we had a galassia of tens of different terrorist movements, and the Red Brigades, they were the better organized, military organized, let's say. And in 78, as I told before, they were able to kidnap the prime minister and they killed him, etc., etc. So the idea of the Red Brigades were to attack the heart of the state. You have to attack the heart of the state. And Negri was accused to be, let's say, one of the secret or thinker, intellectual behind the organization. These accusations were totally false, absolutely false, absolutely false. Nevertheless, Negri was put in jail. And then he get out of jail because he was elected MP in the parliament, because a radical group, decided to elect him as an MP, so he could come out of the prison but after he decided to flee into exile in France. So that's where he started to be in France, collaborating with some comrades in France, etc. This troubled period of persecution lasted about 15 years. More or less 15 years, up to the middle 80s, let's say. So, since the 90s, Negri came back on the intellectual scene, due to this theology. Actually, 4 famous books of Toni Negri were published since the 90s. The first was Empire, all with Michael Hart, Multitude, Commonwealth Assembly, how do you pronounce it? Assembly. All written with Michael R. between 2000 and 2018. So this is the third part of Negri intellectual biography. When he became worldwide famous through these 4 books. And so Toni Negri has become one of the most important authors of this academic tendency known as Italian theory, which goes from Gramsci, passing through Agamben, Esposito maybe, and to Toni Negri and some other authors. So in the last 20 years, such tendency, and we refer to the Italian theory, has enjoyed one of the greatest worldwide success in social and human sciences, following in the footsteps of another economic trend, the so-called French theory. Before we had the French theory, now much more important, let's say, and then maybe also the Italian theory, a bit less known, but somehow it is there. It is indeed a very peculiar story. At the turn of the millennium, some US universities mixed up different European schools of thought. French theory included the most Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, and from the Italian theory, Gramsci, Negri, Esposito, Agamben, etc. and spread them out over the entire globe. The peculiarity of this process, we think, is that different and often conflicting authors and theoretical perspectives were amalgamated together, producing a new theoretical, eclectic, and hegemonical cocktail. Somehow even hegemonical, because from the academic point of view, it is absolutely French theory, and you cannot write something without quoting Foucault, Derrida, or Gramsci. Sometimes we say, you write something and then you have to do the quotation after, otherwise you are outside this hegemonic trend. But this is not the thing we want to focus on today. In fact, we would rather speak on the stance taken by Negri within the debate on the relationship between Anthropocene and Capitalocene. I mean, the two different perspectives mean to design, as we know, the present geological era. So, as a short introduction, we would like to propose a reflection on what we think is a cultural antecedent of this debate. We are referring to what is called the victim paradigm, which we consider like a kind of cultural antecedent of this debate on Anthropocene. To make a long story short, the cultural tendency to present the victims of history as its protagonists. So, quite an important part of culture and post-colonial study has been indeed devoted to the history of genocide, either perpetrated by colonialism or during the wars or within lagers or gulags and so on. Of course, this tendency is absolutely justified. In the aftermath of the Second World War, for too long silence has hidden the extermination of the Jews, because actually maybe it was the trial, Eichmann trial, that reversed this tendency. Maybe in the 50s it was not really like that, but the Eichmann trial reversed this tendency. As for today, the huge amount of colonial crimes against colonized countries is neither nor denounced enough. Even worse, not only is neocolonialism carry on with its crimes, but also it may be intensify its exploitative action in less visible forms. At the same time, consider the crimes against humanity as the crucial point of history is also an important heuristic tool for the discovery and claim and sometimes reinvention of ancient, hidden, and new identities in every corner of the planet. But what is the relationship between what we just said and the issue of Anthropocene? Isn't Anthropocene just a simple scientific term designing a geological age in an objective, neutral way? Not really, of course. We would like to argue that the concept of Anthropocene is somehow at the opposite of the one at work in the victim paradigm. The category of Anthropocene, in fact, bears a more or less hidden denunciation of the culpability of the entire humanity. Humanity is deemed responsible of having laid down its traces in the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, and these traces are now permanently deposited in the stratification of the earth. The reason why these traces should be a guilt is self-evident. They are principally the result of pollution and a general attitude of disregard for the environment, of man as a species. However, here comes the point. Whilst in the victim paradigm, humanity as such is essentially conceived as a victim, in the victim paradigm, in the Anthropocene debate, humanity appears to be the guilty part. Hence, the popular boutade, save the planet, kill yourself, since you are the guilty part. In any case, what we want to point out is that in this juxtaposition, on the same paradigm, victim paradigm and Anthropocene, we can recognize the traditional dilemma between a positive anthropology and a negative anthropology. In other words, two diverse answers to the classic question: is the essence of humanity good or bad? Are we primordially good savages or sinners marked by the original sin? Somehow this debate brings back an old dilemma between a negative and a positive anthropology. In this perspective, we can acknowledge a new trend within the debate on Anthropocene. a trend which brings back into vogue the tradition of a negative anthropology. We could argue that this is not a progressive trend, maybe, but maybe Anthropocene is a necessary evil in order to face the ecological problem in a serious way, a problem that cannot be postponed anymore. In other words, we can think that we would be able to change our relationship with the nature only by repenting of our own wrongdoings against her. Here there is a question. Isn't this way of thinking too conceptual and moralistic or even religious? No? Isn't it a religious way of thinking? No? Because we are sinners, no? So we have to change our relationship, we have to repent for what we did to the nature. No? If we consider the predominance of today's anthropological pessimism from an historical and political point of view, everything changes actually. Likely, this current anthropological pessimism is not only related to the degradation of the environment, but is partially determined and exacerbated by 30 years of neoliberalism hegemony characterized by an unprecedented increase of inequality. I mean, at the core of this pessimism is not only, the fact that we are facing an environment crisis, but we are passing through 30 years of neoliberalism and an incredible increase in global inequality, internal inequality, national, a general increase in inequality. So the anxiety caused by neoliberalism gives way to gloomy memes such as no future or century-long stagnation, etc. And there is no doubt that hope of a better tomorrow for all humanity is wearing off. Such hope, the idea that there is a better future, has characterized the so-called glorious 30 years, I mean from 1945 to 1975, more or less. And in the aftermath, of course, of the Second World War. But it has disappeared. Fukuyama, in his famous book, The End of History, published in 1992, was still preconizing a positive future characterized by the triumphs of the neoliberal democracy. So the communism is dead. Maybe we will have the triumph of the neoliberal democracy. But nowadays, the idea of the end of democracy is animating a widespread debate worldwide. Everybody is speaking. Maybe democracy is over. Maybe it's not working anymore. We are living in a post-democratic society, blah, blah, blah. So if before, let's say 89, we had the communism, then I make it very, very simple. Then the idea was, liberal democracy, the end of history. Now, no more, because democracy is dead. Well, apparently, it is dead. So, the word Anthropocene is used to mark a new geological era, but in reality we think that this category, even if it is used to designate a geological era, this category seems absolutely embedded in the present. Absolutely embedded in the present. Likely it is more the expression of present anxiety rather than a way to define a geological era. It's more the expression of the current anxiety, of our anxiety, and a way to define a geological era. So we want to point out that we are passing through an historical turning point. We suggest that we are no more in a phase characterized by the decline of neoliberalism, because it's already declined, maybe. But we are in a new dark period of capitalism evolution characterized by the spreading on a global scale of the so-called sovereignism. We call it sovereignism in Europe, but I don't know if it's a term you use it, but it's a term, a kind of nationalism without ideology, let's say. Or national if you want to make it simple, but nationalism without ideology. Here you have
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson is the new entry, so we have, but otherwise you have Bolsonaro, Salvini in Italy, Orban, Le Pen, Putin, Xi Jinping, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's really, worldwide, something, absolutely. So that's why you say it's a new era. This is the new era we are facing, actually, political era we are facing.
So the main expression of this trend are Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping, Modi in India, Bolsonaro, Brazil, Salvini, Orban, Boris Johnson, and so forth. Maybe many African leaders also anticipated this phase, if you want to see it in this way. If a theory from the South come or somehow they argue that, and I agree. So all these leaders are well known for being nationalistic, xenophobic, homophobic, and of course authoritarian. They want, once you are nationalistic, of course, you also want the natural family, because there are two concepts connected, the nation, the family, and blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, homophobia, xenophobia, etc. At the same time, it's undeniable that all these leaders displays no sensitivity to the environmental disaster. There is absolutely, from Trump, from Salvini, no sensitivity. Bolsonaro. The most popular slogan of sovereignist leaders is American first, Italian first, and fits in a negative anthropology. Of course, there is no more an idea of humanity as a universal idea. It fits like in a negative anthropology. So let us now focus on the analysis of Negri and his comrades, who call themselves the neo-workerists, following the step of the so-called workers' political experience developing around 68. Negri and his comrades, they certainly set themselves against the present political trend, and there is absolutely no doubt that their anthropological stance is positive, and radically so. Negri is considered too much optimistic sometimes. There is a boutade we always say, communism, according to Negri, communism is already here, but we didn't realize that we are already living in a communist world. As far as Negri and the neo-workerists are concerned, the final category that qualifies the essence of humanity as good is the multitude. In his book, he tried to find out what can be a new subject, for the change, a new political subject, and he said, what is this subject? Is multitude. Multitude is supposed to always exist in a more or less evident and conscious way. The term multitude designates a potentially infinite set of people who cooperate, produce, and invent commons. In an antagonist struggle with the empire. Empire was his first book. What is the empire? I'm making it short. Empire is a term that symbolizes the negative power that exploits the so-called living labor. So the empire, Negri say imperialism does not exist anymore. I mean, you cannot consider, for example, US, it is maybe an imperialist country, but empire is something more, transnational. Absolutely more transnational. So it is something different, empire. So the empire exploit the living labor. And what can be the subject who can oppose this? The multitude. The multitude. The system of thought of Negri and his followers claims the legacy of Marxism, even though they hybridize it with Spinoza, philosophy, and French theory, Foucault, Deleuze, etc. Thus, their terminology comprises concepts such as communism, reinterpreted as a movement in favor of Commonwealth. According to Negri, they say a new definition of communism can be a movement in favor of Commonwealth, and class struggle reinterpreted as a struggle between the altruistic and cooperating multitude and the greedy capitalistic empire. They redefine the classic class struggle in this term. Of course, we are trying to resume the Negri because all the books are 500 pages about, so it's not easy to resume it in 20 minutes. So based on this assumption, it is clear what the position of Negri and his followers is in the debate on how to designate the current geological era. Not surprisingly, they prefer to call it Capitalocene rather than Anthropocene. In their perspective, the responsibility of the current ecological disaster are to be attributed to the capitalist industrial policies rather than to humanity as such. A critical position that nevertheless seem to be reductive to some intellectuals, such as Isabel Stengers and Donna Haraway, who criticize Negri from this point of view. A point that cannot be underestimated emerges from the objection of these two intellectuals, Isabel Stenger and Donna Haraway, that in the face of the gravity of the ongoing ecological and social crisis, the categories of humanity and Homo sapiens themselves need to be radically challenged. For in their name, not only have colonialism, patriarchy, homophobia, rejection of the other been given free rein, but also general contempt for the environment. So according to this stance, capitalism should be regarded not so much as an unhuman economic system, but as a degenerate consequence of the idea of humanity. From this standpoint, we can clearly see the political limitation of Negri's elaboration. Negri takes the collective dimension alternative to capitalism as it is already existent and just in need of organization. I mean, according to Negri, the multitude is there. Is there. It's something which is there. The capitalism is bad, but the multitude is already there. You just need to organize it. You know, you just need to organize, because somehow, if you want to make it simple, humanity is good. No? The idea is humanity, the multitude is there. No? The bad face of humanity maybe is capitalism, but you need to organize the good part. No? The multitude is already there. It's not a political subject that you have to construct. No? It exists. No? It exists. Is it correct? Thank you. No, so this collective dimension, alternative to capitalism, it's already existing. But actually, we think that this dimension has still to be reinvented. Has to be reinvented completely. This debate seems to echo the Marxian distinction between class in itself and class for itself, if you want. It's a whole debate, or Marxian debate. That Negri sought out through Spinoza, through the use of Spinoza, Negri takes this and sought out an idea of class which is always conscious and permanently disposed to struggle. No? Through the use of Spinoza, if you want, according to Negri, the class is always a class for itself. It's always ready to fight. It's always ready to struggle. It's optimistic. On our way towards the conclusion, we would like to propose as a final summary the following epistemological hypothesis, which is directly inspired by Alain Badiou philosophy, but can be traced back to many others, including the geneticist Leontine and even the Italian poet Giacomo Leopardi. To make a long story short, what we now propose could be defined as an ethical neutralization of the categories of humanity and nature. In other words, we affirm the necessity to put an end to the tradition that postulate moral values, be them good or evil, within the categories of humanity and nature, which should be considered neutral. This does not exclude, but rather implies that in the name of both nature and humanity, we can do the worst and as well as the best. In other words, it is undeniable that the entire human history is made by horrors, wars, and exterminations, much as by sublime artistic, scientific, and political invention. At the same time, we can deny that nature, far from being balance, harmony, or an affectionate mother, has long been and will always be also a deadly spouse and a stepmother, indifferent to the fate of her children, like Schopenhauer was saying somehow. No? The nature is absolutely indifferent to the fate to us. At the same time, we can't deny, what does all this mean with respect to the awareness of the living in an, what does this mean with respect to the awareness of living in a Capitalocene era that's still which is still managed by a capitalistic policy? And last but not least, what does all this mean in the face of the spread of nationalism, traditionalist, and oscurantist governments? Maybe it ultimately means that appealing to humanity or respect for nature does not help much. what we need is to invent politics to affirm social justice. Actually, we say the history of South Africa is really a mine of this politics. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. A lot to think with. So we're going to go straight into discussion.
Sure.
Okay. Good. Questions, comments? Particularly those who were in the seminar a short while ago. We had many comments and questions, and we had a discussion then, but others. Suits looking around. I think you're ready for. Okay. Are you then? Okay. So what we'll do if that's all right to take 2 or 3 questions,
okay.
and then we'll have quite a few rounds.
Can I use your pen?
Yep, absolutely. Show you.
Thanks a lot. I was just thinking about, so you ended off with this idea of ethical neutralization of these terms, right?
Yeah.
But I got from your talk that you're also talking a lot about positive, Negri as a kind of having a positive take on humanity, essentially good versus a more Marxist, is that a Marxist orientation where it's about sin and the need to position, or the other position, the negative, which you put there with the post-colonial and all that about humanity. So on the one hand, you seem to be proposing that we need to take this positive approach towards humanity. But you're also saying you want to do this ethical neutralization. So maybe, I guess my question is really just to clarify what this is, because the positive, negative part. And I think the second part of my question is actually related, is that maybe it's not really about whether it's positive or negative. Maybe it's about the way in which you use humanity in this very abstract way. Right? So both Negri, yourself, and as you mentioned in other theorists, they're talking about humanity in the abstract. Right? Now, no post-colonial or critical studies that I know just deals with it like that. Right? It's normally about how humanity was used as claimed to be a universal, when actually it was actually very contingent, full of racist policy, colonialism, all that stuff, right? Yeah. So a lot of the critique is not that there is no humanity, it's just that the humanity which was claimed is not exactly how things work. Yeah. Right? And so it's not about humanity doing something to another humanity, it's about very particular interests and groups like Europe and America and all these other people who went around and did this stuff to other people. So, I mean, once we take this abstract concepts out and we actually look at the history, it's not a question actually. It doesn't seem to be really a question of positive or negative. And I would add just one third point, that this is part of the problem with the Anthropocene, that it tries to create very particular historical conditions into a general problem of humanity. So there are critics of the Anthropocene who actually criticize the whole idea. It's not a universal problem. And we can look around the world at different groups, different levels of infrastructure developing, as you know, right? So, yeah, so maybe my question is to clarify this positive and negative. What are you actually proposing? And are you saying that we should continue with this abstract idea of humanity, even though we know all the pitfalls of this kind of abstraction? Or what explains it?
Okay, because there's so much there, if I may, do you want to respond to that? We did get into that discussion. Okay. Precisely the problem of the concept of the Anthropocene as implying we, as in all humanity, whereas the Capitalocene tries to question that. Yeah, but do you want to go ahead?
No, I mean, let's start from the point of view of Negri. Toni Negri use Spinoza, he reads Marx through Spinoza. So, in somehow, his idea is that, yes, somehow there is a positive humanity, and capitalism, if you want, is the dark side, is the dark side of the humanity. So there is always, Negri goes always forward, saying, no, we go forward. What we propose, a neutralization of the idea of humanity, I think it fits with what you say. I mean, the idea of humanity is not bad nor good. I mean, and of course, in the idea of humanity, you can legitimate racism, gulag, you can legitimate so many things. So what we are, arguing that, according to also Alain Badiou, etc., is that we should consider humanity as such, as a neutral category.
Absolutely as a neutral category, because it doesn't mean, good or bad, etc. But maybe in the Anthropocene, what we want to say, there is an idea of guilty humanity somehow. And somehow it is not neutral, an idea of guilty humanity, because we are guilty, we disregarded the nature, we destroyed everything, blah, blah. Correct, maybe. And of course, a general humanity, guilty general humanity, maybe we can say, no, the Western countries are more guilty, but so what we want to say that we should consider more in this term, it doesn't help so much saying it's good or bad, etc., etc.
Only about Badiou, it is possible to find a good contribution about what we call the neutralization, the ethical neutralization of about the concept of humanity. Humanity is the ethic that is translated in English and is essay about male, the
good and the bad.
The bad, about the bad.
Alain Badiou, the ethics.
It's a very short
pamphlet.
Pamphlet. I have to translate in Italian. My advice.
Yeah. I don't know if you have it.
It's better we can't do Google Translate or
Yeah,
audio.
Here we make very, very simple synthesis about a very big issue that is, for me, the discussion about two notions as nature and humanity. And I think it's a very deep question and that the debate is not enough. What is when we talk about nature, what are you talking about? And when we talk about humanity, what are we talking about? That is a very big philosophical question, but is impossible to go without a good idea, precise idea about that. And I share the current French current structuralist that also referring to Nietzsche. It was the banner was anti-humanistic against the simple and easy idea of humanity. That is a very big question.
But just give an example. For example, in Italy, there is a slogan. We have a lot of problem because the politicians are riding what we call the migrant crisis, etc. Blah blah blah. So one of the slogans against these politicians is "We have to remain human," which doesn't mean anything. What does it mean to remain human? No. We can do the bad and the good, being human. So it doesn't, from the political point of view, it doesn't mean anything. We have to remain human.
Now, the political problem that is that our government now has, come dice, cancellato.
Dimmi cosa poi lo dico io.
No, cancellato una condizione dell'ammissione dei migranti che era la condizione umanitaria. Quindi politically
no, because nowadays our government is refusing the exile to migrants for humanitarian reason. That is over.
And is in the law.
The new law say no, you cannot get humanitarian exile for humanitarian reason. And second, is attacking so much the NGO working in the Mediterranean, etc., etc. But to contrast this trend, say no, we have to remain human. It's
not enough.
It's not enough. Case, what does it mean to remain human? We can be happy, yes, we are human, but doesn't mean anything. And maybe it's not the good, Yeah, sorry, that's it.
Okay, let's take another round. And who else? Okay, as we will go. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I just wanted if you could elaborate a little bit more about your connection between the industrial capitalist scene and then I'm getting obsessive with reading the sentence over and over again. What we need is to invent politics to affirm social justice. Actually, the history of South Africa is an inexhaustible mine of these politics. So, in a way, that if there's a critique against the industrial capitalist scene, which is all about extractive operations and mechanisms, how is mining? I'm just if you could just elaborate a little bit more about this last slide that you have. You've left us with this quote that says so much. But how does it all fit in to what you
It's an unfortunate metaphor.
Yes,
Mine is an extractive.
Right. So yeah, there's this metaphor of extraction, and there's also perhaps
There's a new category.
is there the assumption there that that things are not already here, having a political life of your own, that social justice hasn't already been named, that the history of South Africa hasn't yet already defined and is in deep discussion about the politics of social justice. So what exactly is there to mine from?
No, I gave you, can I answer?
Yeah.
No, of course, this was a bit rhetoric, but the problem is we think, I mean, nowadays, for example, Salvini, all this right movement, xenophobic, etc. I know in Europe and outside Europe, and maybe more in Italy than in other countries, than in Germany, of course, but or in France. But anyway, they have no position. They have absolutely no opposition. So somehow nowadays there is no way to stop them, because either you go back to the nostalgia of Obama times, which will never go back, which we think that time is over. There is a turning point. That time is over. But so if you want to live in the nostalgia, we say maybe we come back to Obama, neoliberal world, etc. But we think that you cannot go back to something who produced what you are living now. To the causes of what is. So this is our point. So for us nowadays, these people like Salvini, Orban, etc., they can do whatever they want. They will become maybe in the next future more and more powerful. They will have more consensus, etc., etc. Maybe it's pessimistic, but we think that is the trend. And that is the trend because the left has disappeared. There is no way to. So it is their time, we think, to reinvent, new politics. In terms, who are the people for? You want to work with migrants, you have to work with migrants. You have to organize the migrants, etc., etc. You work. Anyway, so there are not a lot. It is the time to reinvent new words, new organization. New, come si dice parole d'ordine? You understand? Really something absolutely new slogan, whatever, to reorganize completely, because you cannot go back to Obama or Macron is already a zombie. Is already a zombie. It's part of something which is already over from our point of view. And if you think to go back to let's say a neoliberal order, Salvini, Orban, Trump, Bolsonaro, they will become bigger and bigger and bigger. So it is time to reinvent something. So how can you reinvent something? I don't know, Machiavelli, when he wrote the Prince, he would say, okay, let's say the example, or in the last years, to say, okay, he did this and that and that. Then Gramsci, when he wrote, he said, what is the Prince? Is the Communist Party. According to Gramsci, the Prince is the Communist. So we have the tool, it is the Communist Party. So these are the questions we have to ask ourselves, we think. So it is really a time that we need to reinvent, slogan, words, organization, and maybe, you do it with the experience, no, that you have. And maybe South Africa, you had so many success social movements, I don't know, for everything, medicaments, apartheid, and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, of course, we don't have an answer for that question. But what we want to argue is that it is time to think about how to reinvent something. No, that was a bit the point. Otherwise, there will be no limit to the power of these people. No, there will be no limit to. They will get more and more consensus, as they are doing.
Oh, pretty dark times. Questions, comments? Okay, but now we've got a lot. Okay, we'll take 4 this time, if we can. If you want to write them down.
Sorry. Oh yeah, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, this is very interesting. I've been exposed to a lot of people who are very, very taken by this idea of the Anthropocene, and in your point you make about ethical neutralization, you refer specifically to the categories of human and nature.
Nature, yeah.
Right. Now, I want you to kind of elaborate on kind of the nature side of it. Of course, it seems to me that the little that I know, my wife is more in this area than me. I'm picking up a lot of discussion on Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is not it's a kind of a basket category at the moment. There are a lot of different interest groups that are using. So now on the kind of geological side, there is this kind of environmental and geological side. There's this argument that we need to take the kind of exit from the Holocene seriously. There is a kind of meta debate about whether we can kind of retain Holocene conditions, whether we need to embrace some kind of new emergent reality, or whether we can somehow revert to the Holocene.
You speak a little louder.
Sorry. So within the kind of geological and kind of environmental discourse, it seems to me there is this kind of meta-scientific argument about exiting the Holocene. Whether we should take that seriously, whether we should embrace that and try and create something new. All of this revolves around some kind of revalorization of the human versus other categories of non-human. Perhaps the 2 most important are non-animals, animal life and emerging technologies. So if you could elaborate on, what are you proposing in terms of, this distinction between the classical distinction between human and nature?
Okay, let's take a couple more. Yes.
It's a quick one, but I was wondering, how are we post-neoliberal, really? What does that imply and mean?
Good and to the point. Other comments, questions?
It's a quick comment, and I agree entirely that we need to have a new conception, a new language, if you like. So difficult. And you give South Africa as a good example. It's not such a good example. And we had, at one stage, a mass democratic movement. Let's call it that. It encompasses a whole lot of things. Very much influenced by the African National Congress. I was a member of both. And the problem was that in the African National Congress we had the 2-stage theory of revolution, which goes way back to the early Communist parties. So we would then have the national liberation struggle for democracy, and then we would move to a socialist. Now, people here like Neville Alexander, Dr. Neville Alexander, who said, we disagreed with that. He said, we'll never get to the social stage, we'll get stuck at the national democratic stage, and that's where we are right now. So, although there was a fantastic movement to get rid of apartheid, which obviously was a good thing, many of the people sitting in this room would not be in this room if apartheid was still existing. And lots of people don't remember that history, but so it was, and dignity was a big issue. People, if you walked as a black person down the street and a white person came, you'd have to get off the road path of the white person. And a whole lot of things. So at the dignity level, it's done in more enormous amount. It's also provided electricity, water to rural areas which never had. So there is a lot, and we shouldn't overly criticize the ANC, although I'm bitterly disappointed at the route we are now taking. So therefore, to come in with this, now we get on the table Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party. Started by NUMSA, started actually initially as an eco-socialist agenda, but it morphed. So that when it gets started, NUMSA is the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. So when it gets launched, it becomes a strict Marxist-Leninist organization with a vanguard party known as movement with this vanguard party. And that you can see the whole power dynamics coming into play, so that eventually they contest an election. There has been no election. There was no base on which to mobilize that party. The people that were supposed to go to parliament were just appointed from above. They get 25,000 votes, which is less than 1/10 of the claimed NUMSA, and I believe the NUMSA membership claim is about 350,000. So they get 25,000. The General Secretary of NUMSA is one who strongly proposes or puts on the agenda this SRWP, and it causes a fracture. Yeah, so it causes a quick fracture in the labour movement. So we're back to where we started, actually.
Sorry, we just mentioned your acronym, but that's a socialist party.
Sorry?
What you just...
Yeah, SRWP is supposed to be a socialist party. So that's a traditional Marxist-Leninist.
Threes, do you want to? Yes, Anne?
Hi, that was really interesting, thank you. I'm sorry to be missing the one on Gramsci. So you're talking about this new invention and what this new invention may be, and you ended up with the idea of social justice, but this is probably connected to the idea of the Commonwealth instead of communism, and I was wondering if you can expand on that. Thank you.
Okay. Now maybe I start from the second question. You asked how can we define ourselves as post-neoliberal, something like that. Okay, yeah, maybe it was too much, but what we are saying that okay, if we want to periodize, we pass through from 45 in Europe, just make it simple, from 45 to 75. I mean, what we call the 30s glorious years. No? I mean, the most or the richest decades in Europe history, in all Europe history. You know, all this the decrease of inequality, the fact that, for example, Italy became a country made up of middle class. You know, a huge middle class. You know, who can afford holidays, car, etc., etc. So, what we think that or this is the point of Valerio, is that this thing was possible, this period was possible because there was dialectics between communism and capitalism. So, overall in Italy, on some parts of Europe, we had a moderate capitalism. If you see a town house, Bologna, no unemployment, nothing, because sometimes the capitalism was scared of a communist revolution, so it was a moderate. No? After 89, we enter in what we call the neoliberal era, where we say capitalism can go naked. No? It's not a shame anymore, you know, can go naked, etc., etc. And this era, we think start, of course, with Thatcher, Reagan, whatever, but somehow finish in 2008 with the financial crisis, where maybe something new is emerging and is chaotic. We don't know exactly what is going to be because we are still in a transition phase, you know? But it has changed. Things has changed. We cannot say we live in a Clinton period now anymore. No, Trump is different. Even Salvini is completely our leader now. Is not our leader.
is an interior minister, but anyway, he behaved like he's being the president of the world. You know, he's completely different to the leader of the what we call the left Rosé party, who ruled Italy for let's say 10 years, or even Berlusconi, that at the end of the day was a clown, but you know, he was not like this one. You know, he was not a racist, he was not a xenophobic, was not. No? So something has changed, and maybe. The good question was, but what is the end point of these people? Who told you that these people, they have a end point? You know? What is their goal? Maybe they don't have goals, these people here. They don't have, maybe we are passing through a season that the passions, the sentiments, are more important than the interests. You know what? I don't know if I can explain myself. Of course, it's not black and white, no? And maybe we are passing through a transition. But again, it's like, you know, yes, you can ask Salvini, but what the hell do you want? What is your project of society? You know? This is pragmatism. No? It is day by day creating chaos. You know, day by day. So, and what we want to, let's say, to underline is that maybe we think that something has changed completely with the election of these guys here. You cannot compare this. I mean, this world is completely different if you put here Obama, Renzi, Putin was already there. It's completely different. We are living in another world, like, I don't know, in the fascist time, in the after World War, and now this is the neoliberal war, and now this is another, you know, completely new world somehow. Of course, then the economic, but you know, Negri is always accused to be too much economicistic, you know, to focus too much on economy, but maybe politics is also autonomous sometimes. It is autonomous. It is. So that's what I wanted to. Maybe you suggest, for example, what can we do? Negri founded a movement. It's called Euronomade. Negri is for the European Union. No? He supports the European Union. Why? Because according to Negri, and somehow I think he's right from this point of view, the state is a zombie. It's finished. The national state is finished. So some of the, let's say, movement, nationalist movement in the global south were contesting, you know, Negri, because some of the movement, they are still working within the national struggle, within the nation state, you know, struggling for the national liberation, etc., etc. But according to Negri, he said, this is over. This is over. I mean, if you keep on struggling in that context, you are struggling against the Mulino, you say, you know, what is Don Quixote, you know, you are like Don Quixote, you know. So, because it is over, no? It is over. Because the empire is no more based on a single state, you know, etc., etc. The empire is, you know, a transnational organization, a multiple empire, if you want, a multiple set. Maybe there are towns that they are more powerful than a single, or companies that are more powerful than a single state. So you say, if you want to struggle within, you know, a national context, you are just, you know, you don't understand the time you are living with, and so your strategy is just wrong. You know? You are going to fail. Of course, Negri, from this point of view, was contested by, you know, some, I don't say nostalgic, but, you know, of the development world, you know, struggling for national liberation, blah, 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 blah. That, of course, they are still, you know, thinking that the national level can be the plan of the struggle. Saying no. So that's why Negri, of course, is for the European Union. You can say, but what is the European Union? Is also a state, or what is that? So there's a lot of contradiction. But anyway, now, for example, you, Stephen, I think you always say, we want to enforce the state. Maybe the social movements should somehow support, enforce the state. We need a good state to work. But the question here, is it possible that the state nowadays is going to be
something which will never work again, or is just something of the past. So Negri said, no, that is a zombie. If you look, if you want, yeah, the national state is a zombie. It's something for some small looter who use the state to loot it, but that's it. Huh? Some small looter. Sorry.
No, I think this is very important for us because I think we're quite parochial in South Africa. I'll speak for myself.
You are quite
parochial. So my sense of the state is the South African state.
Yeah, sure.
You know, can we recapture the state from the zombies? So and then there's an argument about the need of people for the state, particularly the poor and so on. So it's an argument that is very immediate in this space, but I hear what you're saying at another level, and that's why I think it's so crucial for us to have these kinds of discussions, because generally we're talking about South Africa, Southern Africa, or Africa.
It's very important, one point that the state, magari lo dico in italiano, no, diciamo, gli stati come sono arrivati finora erano stati partito, party states, e in Sudafrica is absolutely clear. No? The NC was sono stati partito, ed è la crisi dei partiti che oggi...
What do you want to say that the state has been working in Europe, maybe somehow even in South Africa, like when somehow the state were controlled by party, but now the party, the Communist Party, which was the example of all the parties.
Without party, the state
doesn't work
down, because the big party, as in Italy, no? Now there is a little party or party of communication or party fragmentation with media.
Since the party collapse in Italy was quite clear in the 90s, they collapsed, no? Because of corruption, they all collapsed. The Communist Party collapsed, the Christian Democratic Party, which was been the ruling party, collapsed, etc., etc. So you have just a fragmentation and say, but nowadays, where is a party who works anymore? I mean, the Socialist Party in France has disappeared. I mean, it's a long tradition, was disappeared. There's no more Socialist French Party. It's incredible.
And this politics, this leader, use a fragment of the state against the other fragment of state and over the other fragment of society. In Italy, is absolutely clear. Our chief of our leader use always the
police uniform.
Police uniform.
He goes around with the police uniform. So somehow he's using a part of the state against the other part of the state. You know, the state is fragmented, and you create you create a chaos for using some part of the state against the other part of the state. You know, it's like a fragmentation of the state. You know.
That's what's happening in South Africa.
Can I just ask?
Yes, and let me just ask, there are a couple, am I right, there are a couple of questions there? Yes, no?
But I just want to know if we're also seeing then the end of democracy, because these people were all elected, right? They got there through the mechanisms of democracy. But I mean, if this is what democracy gives us, is this also meaning the end?
Also Hitler was elected.
Also Hitler was elected. Yeah. I mean, if you consider just...
Should we take, let me take okay, so that's one there.
Yeah,
Rin?
maybe just a short...
I should have mentioned if people can introduce themselves. This is late in the day. But
PhD student from Rice University in Houston.
Lorenz. Yeah.
I'm still grappling with the very last part of the presentation where we also talked about the ethical neutralization and what this moment is like now and what kind of political action can be possible. So on the one side, it seems to be that concepts like the Anthropocene, maybe like the dictates of the Capitalocene, suspend political action in a way, they paralyze action as well. they mobilize maybe more individuals, small acts, what we talked earlier on as well. But then we have also like other activism rising where Greta Thunberg calls for panic, right? The house is on fire. So I'm wondering whether this talk about liberalization actually helps us so much, and we should rather look at how all these other emotions and effects could be mobilized for other types of collective action here. And the second question I had was around a more academic question around the difference between Donna Haraway's approach and Toni Negri's approach. You mentioned that Haraway is critiquing Negri, but then I also find there are many similarities when we talk about, she calls it like the multi-species responsibility and talks about making kin. So maybe we have here some, maybe more parallels than we think between Negri's approach.
Want to introduce yourself at this late stage of
I'm
the day?
Shahid, I'm a lecturer here. Thanks so much for your thing. I just wanted to push you one more time on the state story. But I feel like, at one point, these arguments about the dissolution of this very neoliberal kind of critiques, right? That the neoliberal capital is coming and the state is receding, and it's leaving. Now, increasingly, I got the impression that this has been proven wrong. Firstly, because it's based on an idea as if state and capital are ever distinct. That's false, right? So anybody who's realized this here as being two distinct spheres doesn't make any sense, right? So what's happening here is not that, even in neoliberalism, it's not that the state is receding. The state is just creating new kinds of spaces for capital to come in. Right? It's a new kind of arrangement, right? So if you look at things like surveillance in America, right? It's Google does the surveillance. America and the intelligent guys are all up in this, right? The internet. I mean, you can go into all these things. We always know it's together. So, are you sure about this? The European Union.
I'm sure.
No, the European Union is still a conglomerate of nation states. If it was just an idea of coming together, then we let Turkey in. But Turkey doesn't fit into the idea of Europe, so it therefore stays out. I mean, we have to look at the exclusions, right? To look at what's happening. So it seems like the state is extremely strong. It continues to be. I don't know, are you maintaining?
No.
But otherwise, why are you talking about these guys? The sovereignties. Huh? They're going around waging war over the world in the name of nations.
Is there one more? How many you got there?
No, qua il problema dell'orientazione dello Stato.
Is there one more question, comment? Because
well, sorry. Maybe we start from the left. I mean, it depends on what you consider state, we could say, of course, from the point of the welfare state is over, or it's a bit over. Of course, we have like a securitarian state. Doesn't make you sense this term? Yeah, like a securitarian state. Yeah.
National security state.
Yeah. But at the same time, yes, it is true. Capitalism and the state, they always went together, like in a good wedding. But nowadays, it seems that capitalism doesn't even need anymore, to have someone to open spaces. But again, I think that for me, the way you think, maybe it's too much economicistic. You know what I mean? Maybe we are facing a new stage where the political passion, will become more important than just normal economic discourse. To say it's like Chomsky saying no. At the end of the day, Trump is doing the same thing as before, but in another way. But we think something has changed. Has changed in the mind of the people, the mind of the people, because you see things that you never saw before. I don't know. This racism in Europe, we never saw it before. But open like that. The state has become racist itself. So it is something new from this point of view. It
It is something new. And I don't know if it is just, another way to say, no, it is the way the state somehow still make the interest of the bourgeoisie, say, okay, the state is just, a club who the bourgeoisie make his interest.
I think that we are in front of a historical turn that so big that implies a rethinking also not nature, humanity, but also history. And I am for an idea of history very
Discontinuity, with some discontinuities.
So in my life, in my long life, I have an experience of another turn like that. It was exactly when the communism in the world fell down, no? Finish of communism. When I was young, my life is with the half world red, and the other against this, and all was different in my experience. all, every sensation, it was really another world. And after there is a world beginning by Thatcher, Reagan, Pope Wojtyla, etc. No? So now with this kind of horrible leaders, we are in front of a new era, not Anthropocene or Capitalocene, but new era, so short era, but new era, that imply to change way to see the politics and so on. So I try to build this idea of history so not without continuity. No, every era is a way. My inspiration is a phenomenology, the category of era, period. That at time, 20 or 30 years, the world changed in political perspective, not in every. I am against every idea of totality, altogether. No, there is a different activity, different form of consciousness. So, regarding to political perspective, I think that we are in front of really new, horrible, obscure, terrible era. But we have to invent new tools to epistemological and so on.
No, the idea of democracy. Yeah, it is. Of course, they were voted, but what is also Italy was voted. I mean that is also part, and then we can think about how the votes are so easily manipulated. I mean, and at the end of the day, for example, Valerio doesn't go to vote because he says this is just a stupid act to say yes, because everything,
Sometimes.
No, I do
Sometimes
vote.
I do
vote, because every time there is an election, I have to go to vote. And but for example, in Italy, was normally a country where 90% of the people used to go to vote. This year it was 60%. So this guy actually got 34%, Salvini. Of the 60% of the vote, it means like 70% of the population. So he has the majority of the parliament with the 70% of the population. So yes, democracy, of course, is facing a big crisis from this point of view. And then, who the hell do you vote? You vote the people who are already, organized by the party, because you go to vote. And before.
when you go to what, Berlusconi or Renzi, or maybe Bush or Clinton, what was the difference? So, you know, what was the neoliberal? They were more or less the same, you know, more or less the same. It was not a big change, you know. Now it is a big change. Now this is a big change. No, you say Greta. No, Greta, she comes also to it. Greta, how do you say, Greta Thunberg? No. Yes, she came also to it, and she was, I mean, she's someone who divided completely the public opinion, no? Some of them, some newspaper just insulted them, say Greta, she's stupid, blah blah blah, and some other, they exalted her, no? But for me, Greta is is the someone. Is it politics? She just say, okay, politicians, you have to learn what the science say. No? Please learn what the science say. So it is nothing, you know, or it doesn't imply any organization, any, you know, from this point of view, any mobilization apart from that.
I mean, the question was more on the political sensations. I just used it as an example for what you called like anxiety, right? How to leverage these anthropological pessimisms and affect.
And about the commons, what is the question?
The Fardonna way commons. So can you repeat your question?
I was just asking if you could, you'd mentioned as a way forward it's about social justice, and earlier I just wanted to have the link with the Commonwealth and a viz with communism, if you could just expand on that. Is that idea of social justice fitting in with the Commonwealth? And how is that different to communism?
The inspiration of Negri to theorize Commonwealth was the Nobel Holstrom, was Eleanor Holstrom in the year 1 year before the book of Negri take
the Nobel Prize
for theorization of commons. So Negri gives a leftist perspective of this theorization. No, I want to only point at this.
For example, in Negri, no, what is the distinction between Commonwealth and public? No, we say, is it public water, or is a Commonwealth, or is it public? No, the distinction is that since Negri doesn't agree anymore with the idea of the state. The public is something controlled by the state, so it's something outside the society. No? But the commons is something managed by, let's say, the society, the multitude, you know, which organizes itself, you know, to let's say, to create the commons, actually, because you can create the commons. No? So the idea is public. The water can be public. No, in the public, yes, because it's controlled by the state. No, it is
so
an institution.
There is a lot of people who organize themselves to manage the water or the other. This is common, and common is for me is a little bit joke. Communism is a little bit rhetoric. A little bit. It's very difficult to combine communism and common. It's very strange. It's an idea of Negri, but it's very very rhetoric for me.
Is that because communism requires such extraordinary organization? Were we talking about the Bolsheviks coming into
if you talk about communism, you have a long history with all the question. No? Negri said, I am communist. Me, I was personally, I was always all my life communist, but now I feel a little bit difficult to say I am communist because it's so complicated to understand what mean, no? So to overcome this problem, putting commons and communism together is not a good way for me. It's a little bit confusing, simple way, no? Yeah. Propagandistic way.
Yeah. It seemed, and this is, I think, what we were discussing, I think we're drawing to a close now, but we were discussing earlier this, how do you act in this world? How do you create organizational forms, if you do, if that's what you're interested in doing? Is it sufficient for Greta Thunberg to be this voice of the moment, and we kind of exposed to it via YouTube, and there's no real face-to-face? Is there a short-circuiting of what went into creating a left politics, which was, as you know, in Italy, required extraordinary organizational work as a and since, a brief allusion to the work he did with the United Democratic Front and the ANC back then, was an extraordinary thick level of organizational work. Whereas now things seem to have speeded up, that we expect politics to emerge from that. That's why multitude. Where's the organizational impetus for that? I mean, you can't just bring it into being magically. It's past mundane labor of organization.
We think that multitude does not exist, but
multitude exists. In the last book, Assembly, Negri tried to explain and to rethinking, but it's always not enough for me to justify this apology of multitude.
And then there have been critiques of Occupy, similarly, that it imagined this would all unfold, but these are often hyper-transient assemblies, because you need infrastructures, infrastructures to sustain these assemblies, or whatever term you use.
Just very quickly, you've never mentioned Castells, maybe for a quick reason. Castells has this notion of the third space.
Castells.
Manuel Castells. Which is the IT space with ground level space. And that was the Arab Spring had that notion. I mean, he took it from
Should we have that? Do you want to respond briefly now? Because I think people, let's have a time.
Is far from our perspective, all discussion of Castells. I know some books of some years ago about the media, society, communication and education, all this problematic. I have no idea about our perspective now, but maybe is to rethink about Castells, maybe.
Can I?
I have no answer.
We'll chat. You'll be chatting here. Okay, so just to wrap up, thank you both very much. It's almost as if you've come from the storm in Europe. It's really quite a serious political space, and I find we're often very caught up in our own serious crises, and there's no real engagement, I sense, across the academic and the more political world beyond the university institution. It's almost looked down upon if it's not very sophisticated theory. It doesn't belong here. But you're coming from a place where it's quite clear always theory and practice have been key to the unfolding of politics in Italy. And we're caught in the vortex of something else that I don't think we fully understand where we are. We can't look at it as if this place is somehow outside of what's happening in all these places that you're referring to, Italy, Brazil, and so forth. So I hope, it's not too bleak a picture, but these aren't pretty times, but it requires innovation, and I think we can't just be repeating the same, using the same concepts and a certain complacency that we're not in Italy, we're not in Brazil. We've got our particular problems here, which we certainly do and we have to address.
But I mean, so what is happening, for example, in Italy is different, absolutely different from Germany. But anyway, nobody could expect it like even 2 years ago. Even you could not expect it. It was just a wave.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.